Hey everyone, and welcome back to Hive Live. I'm Alex Nette, and today we're taking you through the biggest cybersecurity breaches of spring 2025. Because let's face it, it's been a busy few months with cybersecurity breaches, bugs, and breakdowns. Let's go. If you're not already following us, what are you waiting for? We're sharing practical cybersecurity insights daily across all the major social media platforms under @Hive Systems. So go give us a follow and stay in the loop. Joining me today is my co-host, Andrew Bradley. Andrew is a cybersecurity expert, compliance guru, and deck building connoisseur. Andrew, great to have you here.
Great to be here as usual. And yes, my deck is almost done. It's only been a year now.
Actually, you know what? I realized that's doing double entendre work. Good for us. Let's get right into it. I want to talk about a story that's been hitting the airwaves here. As it's an interesting place, as data is now believed to kind of be the currency of the world across everything. One of the things that we're seeing here is a story about 23andMe. The worst part is they were hit with a second data breach in less than a year. But notably, of course, 23andMe is currently also up for sale, which brings about a lot of interesting implications. That genetic testing company suffered that second significant data breach, which affected nearly 7 million users. The problem, of course, with that is they hold a lot of information for their users. And so the question becomes, what has been stolen and what has walked out the door? Of course, when you lose a credit card and it's stolen, you can get a new number. When you lose a password or it gets stolen, you can get a new password. But when you lose biometric information like your DNA or your fingerprints, those cannot be replaced. And so it's that extra level of sensitive information. Andrew, I think you and I have seen this before in the days of OPM, so this is not new. But this one is interesting because it's a collision of a bunch of different factors for them all at once.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a lot of the states there's a lot of people that are affected by this breach. One, the first breach, and now again the second breach. So states are actually suing to block the sale of the data along with the sale of the company. I think Regeneron Pharmaceuticals was the company that's interested in purchasing 23andMe, and a lot of the states are suing to prevent the data that was collected by 23andMe in the past from being sold along with that acquisition. But this breach certainly doesn't help matters, right? Because now that data is out there. So if it's out in the public domain, there's less of a compelling case for the courts to block the sale of the data as well, since now it's already accessible. So I think the states that are trying to block this, the movement of the data between 23andMe and whoever their new suitor is, are going to face an uphill challenge when it comes to the court decision there, because these breaches have now basically put that data out there. If they were fully sequestered and fully secure and not in the public domain, those records not in the public domain, I think you would see a lot of injunctions in preventing the sale of that data as well. But now it's up in the air. So I personally tried to delete my account and do their data deletion process.
How'd that go?
Yeah, it didn't go too well, to be honest. I got a notification that I've entered the queue, but they were supposed to notify me like 90 days later with the results, and I haven't gotten anything.
Is it manually being deleted?
That's a good question. They don't tell you whether or not it's an automated system or a manual system in their privacy policy or anything like that. Plus, with the dysfunction going on with their bankruptcy, if it was a manual process, I don't know that there's anybody there to service it. So I did submit that data deletion request. I have not gotten any confirmation back in the past, I think, 4 months now that data deletion has completed. So if you are a former 23andMe user or subscriber, definitely go submit that workflow, go submit that data deletion request. Your mileage may vary though. So be forewarned that it may not guarantee you that your data gets deleted, because we have no idea what's going on internally over there.
Yeah, and some interesting takeaways too from this, from both the cybersecurity side and the business, mergers and acquisition side. Notably, 23andMe had optional multi-factor authentication enabled at the time, with less than 22% of users enabling it. So the early output was that the breach was attributed to a credential stuffing attack, which means that people who reuse their passwords across the internet, when those passwords are found on the dark web, people aggregate large lists and they try them on lots of sites. So in this case, it would appear that about 7 million people had reused passwords on other sites that they used on 23andMe and had not enabled MFA, allowing these hackers to get right in. From a business side, terrible time to have a breach if you're trying to increase your value for a sale. So from a mergers and acquisitions perspective, got to do that due diligence if you're getting ready to sell, or I guess if you're going bankrupt, you're probably out of time and out of money. But That being said, yeah, both of them have huge impacts. So not a great day for them.
Yeah, and I mean, to be quite honest, the fact that MFA is only optional on a company that's collecting, genomic data from people
Yeah.
is absolutely ridiculous in 2025 to begin with. But also, it just goes to remind people that your password is only as secure as the weakest place you've used it since you've been using that password. So if you've been using the same password since 2010, 2012, or slight iterations of it, there's a good chance it's already been breached and it's already out there and being used for credential stuffing attacks. So it behooves you to go change all those passwords, use a password manager, do the same stuff we always tell you with your password hygiene, because like I said, there you go.
Shout out to
Hive
password table. Always lurking here in the background.
Your password is only as safe as the weakest site that it's been used for.
That's right. That is right. Good one. And yeah, definitely. Good point too. It's HIPAA information, I would assume. So there could be a lawsuit brought from the DOJ, but I'm not counting on that anytime soon. Speaking of healthcare, United Health Group is back in the news. They seem to have a pretty regular cyber attack, and I wonder how many times we're going to cover them. This one, unfortunately, disrupted U.S. healthcare services. So back in May, they suffered one of the largest they're one of the largest healthcare providers in the U.S. And this attack, unfortunately, targeted the company's IT infrastructure. So that led to things like appointment cancellations, delayed prescriptions, limited access to your health information for both doctors and individuals, those patients. So a huge impact. As we always talk about in the world of cybersecurity, cybersecurity covers the confidentiality of information, keeping things secret, the integrity of information, making sure it stays the same, but the availability is just as important. Obviously, many companies and hospital groups and healthcare providers rely on United Healthcare systems, and so when it's unavailable, that's a huge problem. Andrew, obviously, healthcare is a huge impact for a number of people. And unfortunately, for many users, in this case, they could not have stopped this breach, unlike 23andMe. So it puts them in a bad spot.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, anybody in the healthcare field these days, especially covered entities, you got to go beyond HIPAA, right? HIPAA sets one set of requirements for people and sets, continued compliance obligation, but it's not enough anymore, especially with these sophisticated attack vectors, ransomware, stuff that we're seeing that affect the availability side of things. HIPAA is really concerned about confidentiality, integrity of the data, less so about the availability. But as we're seeing here with the United Healthcare breach, the delay of services or the unavailability of services directly impact the health and lives of human beings. Mm-hmm. So these people have to step up their security, especially in the healthcare industry. One of the things that you have to think about as United Healthcare or any other major insurer is that you're going to be a target now. There's a lot of dissatisfaction with this industry in general. In the public domain. So you're going to be a target, not just by nation state actors, but just disgruntled people who maybe have been denied claims. So it would behoove them to keep themselves ahead of the attackers' game here and invest significantly, make more significant investments in cybersecurity, not only from confidentiality and integrity perspective, but also the availability side of things.
Yeah, agreed. And I think it's going to continue to be a huge problem for both them. Again, this is not the first time and likely not the last time they've been having some problems. So especially when so many people rely on that for healthcare and their health outcomes, these companies have to be doing a better job. So that's really my expectation moving forward. But here we are talking about them once again. So good for us.
Yeah, it won't be the last time either, I'm sure.
I am sure as well. Looking back from a little while ago, this one's interesting. New threat intelligence has come out from a firm called Gray Noise. They reported a notable surge in scanning activity targeting MOVEit transfer systems. So this was a huge breach from a while ago. It impacted almost like 1,000 U.S. schools and several state governments and universities who rely on this technology. And as a result, there's been a huge surge in scanning. I'm guessing somebody is looking back out to see if people have fallen asleep on this or if there's still vulnerabilities hanging out there. Because at this point, maybe there's a new exploit that helps it move faster. No clue. All that's to say, right, this intelligence is good intelligence for those companies to act on, because especially if those universities or organizations or governments are still relying on MOVEit, they appear to absolutely not only be vulnerable, but people are actively working to exploit it.
Yeah, I think it's a good example of where you can't just become complacent once something has supposedly been fixed or patched, right? The attackers have a reason for why they come after certain industries or certain software, certain sectors, and they will keep coming back so long as the incentives continue to be there for them. So they will continue to push your security buttons and try to find ways to compromise your software stack or compromise your systems. So you can't just stop at the one patch or the one hot fix that supposedly fixes the issue that was caused in the past. You got to be continuously vigilant now. I think in MoveIt's case, that's definitely apparent.
Yep, and I'm a little disappointed if anybody out there still has it hanging around. Every single vulnerability scanner has been able to identify and find these for a while. So any lack in patching, unfortunately, is kind of, I don't know, a little bit of karma coming for you at this point, because it has been a while since that's been released and everybody's been talking about it. Excellent. Along those same lines, we have some interesting things coming from the world of AI. Whether or not MoveIt's surge is related to AI exploits or not, can't say. However, the EU once again leading the way with AI or just regulation in general. Obviously, the most famous is GDPR. That's been followed by a number of other acts, but they are the first across the line in terms of passing a AI-related act. They finalized that in late 2023, but it's set to take full effect by August of next year. So as we head through the summer, that 12-month countdown is starting. This is pretty comprehensive legislation. Mandates that companies operating in or serving the EU, looking at everybody from FANG and in between across the US, need to comply with these rules based on AI systems risk levels. So general purpose AI models like ChatGPT need to meet those transparency standards, follow that copyright directive, and ultimately disclose training data. That's going to be a huge boon to make sure that these systems are operating effectively and safely. That being said, high-risk AI systems are going to face stricter oversight requirements. And like GDPR, they've come in hard with the punishments. Violations are going to incur up to a 7% fine of global revenue. So huge, massive fines for non-compliance. Obviously, many companies are still dealing with GDPR. Here in the States, we haven't figured out privacy still. So I don't anticipate us even trying to cross the finish line on AI regulations anytime soon. But that being said, U.S. firms that operate globally are going to have to comply with this regardless. Andrew, I don't know, is this the right way to go in terms of getting that kind of legislation in place? And does it give us the opportunity to maybe see more about how these models have been built or steal more information about them?
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking of the collective groan of thousands of CTOs across companies trying to implement some sort of AI or LLM solution into their product stacks. But, it's hard to tell. The EU oftentimes comes out with a chainsaw approach where scalpel is needed, but a lot of times they understand that, and it's with purpose. So they come out with these highly aggressive regulations, and then they tend to pare them down. They back them down as industry kind of gives more feedback, and some of the challenges with meeting those regulations are identified. So they come out with more broad sweeping regulations and then kind of pare them down over time versus the United States stance, which is much more capitalist kind of focused, where we basically take a light touch to start off, and then we regulate as people take advantage of the situations and people take advantage of the lax regulation climate here. And then we start adding things. So it's a little bit of a fundamentally different approach. In the AI sector, the biggest concern is that this type of broad regulation will stifle innovation. Now, the people making that argument are usually the same people that I talked about before, making the ones collectively groaning because it impacts their ability to capitalize off this in some way. But I do think that it is necessary. There are just some security and privacy issues with AI and generative AI and LLMs that cannot be overlooked, and they cannot be set aside for the time being just with a wait and see approach. The United States is trying to pass legislation that will basically prevent legislation against local legislation and state legislation against AIs for the next, I think, 10 years for the foreseeable future, basically, to try to help spawn innovation, to help spur innovation in the United States. The problem with that is you get all the risk associated with it. The EU's got the opposite approach. They're trying to address all the risk all at once, which I don't know if is necessarily the best way to go about it. But the United States isn't addressing any risk at all. So we've got these two competing approaches, and we'll have to see which one is best here. But when it comes to AI, generative AI, and LLM, I tend to believe that the more restrictive approach up front is better, just because of the massive amounts of security and privacy risks that this stuff basically creates from, depending on the data sets that are being used. Without transparency in the data sets that are being used to train models, we have no idea where this information is coming from, who's been contributing to it, whose personal information or sensitive information might be included in those data sets that are being used to train these and might be leaked.
Or how well built the models are for that matter in the first place, right?
Exactly,
Are they even
right?
giving good information? Are they just hallucinating like 95% of the time? That's not
Yep.
a worthy model worth using. So,
and I mean, like we're talking about things like Grok and ChatGPT right now, where you're seeing some of the bias in the data sets peek through. I don't know if you call it bias or you just call fact a fact, but the creators of those are starting to be concerned because they're starting to see like the responses that people are getting lean a certain direction that they don't necessarily like. It doesn't align with their personal interests, and so they go back and they want to adjust the models. Who says that they can adjust them? Why should they adjust them? If what these LLMs are seeing in these massively accessible training data sets that they're getting from the general public, we don't know exactly what's going on behind the scenes, but why should they be interfering with what the model is learning, right? What is being trained up here? So there's like a lot of questions just around the training side of things, the data sets that are being used, the privacy and security considerations, and then just obviously the way that these things are being used, replacing human workers and human, creative and development type pathways, career pathways are being kind of like overwhelmed with this new technology that's supposed to make things a lot easier, but the results may not necessarily be as good as somebody who's sitting there and doing it themselves. So there's a lot to consider. And I think the EU's approach here is a little aggressive, but at the same time, they always have the ability to pare it down, right? They always have the ability to come back and reduce that regulatory oversight and the regulatory burden. Whereas the United States' hands-off approach here is like basically just inviting something bad to happen, and then they'll go deal with the problem, which I don't think that's the best approach.
And we did have some legislation that got put on pause. I think they were starting to at least say, let's lay down a framework, and is often encouraged by a number of people in industry. That, of course, has been set aside in the name of innovation, allegedly. So I'm interested to see. Andrew brought up an interesting point because a major tech lobbying group, CCIA Europe, whose members include Alphabet, Meta, and Apple, are already urging the European Union to pause implementation of the AI Act, saying it's, quote, a rushed rollout. Again, note the date next year in August is rushed for companies that, boon themselves on quarterly projects and moving fast and breaking things. So, yeah, part of me hopefully says that the EU says, yeah, we're not hearing it.
Yeah, I don't really think you can consider this rush, considering LLMs have been around basically for consumer usage for the past 3 years. So I don't really know if you can call it rush at this point. And plus, we're already starting to see some of the negative impacts of generative AI, especially in the form of misinformation and adversarial, information games that China and Russia are pulling on the United States. Like, we're starting to see some of the negative impacts right now, and the way it's impacting people in their daily lives and news cycles and stuff like that. So I don't think you can wait, but also the way that the EU tends to approach regulation in general, like I said, is more of like a chainsaw approach than a scalpel.
In researching the story, this is my favorite thing I have found, and I cannot confirm or deny, but this is the cover of that report, the actual act.
Was it AI generated?
As best I can tell, the bottom of those letters sure look a little curved. I think it was AI generated. So
I think maybe they're trying to make a point here, but maybe that wasn't the best idea,
I got an immensely good chuckle out of that. And it looks like an old AI image model. I guess it was back in 2023. So that was the best they can do. So here we are. That's how meta this has become. All right. One of the interesting things, of course, long time in terms of driving the cybersecurity industry has been the insurance industry. One of the biggest things over the years has been for cyber insurers. Originally, they rolled out cyber insurance policies, and they said this is going to be a way to make an easy buck. Ironically, those insurance companies, or unironically, maybe karma came and got them, they started getting hammered as people were filing cybersecurity related issues. Again, not just for data breaches, but availability impacts and the like. Those companies went in the red super fast. And so all of them quickly changed their tune. One, a lot of insurance companies started to raise their premiums on cyber insurance to try to cover down on the fact they were getting crushed. Number two, they started implementing requirements for companies. So much like your car needs to be a certain number of years old, or you have to have a certain number of safe drivers, they start requiring specific things. Those specific things that they require have been interesting over the years because they've changed. Most likely, it has been driven by how people have applied for reimbursement after an incident or filed claims. And so they've used that data to drive those requirements over time. More importantly, too, for a lot of cyber insurance policies, in case you didn't know, they don't cover everything. So, for example, they might cover your downtime from ransomware, but they won't cover the ransom itself. So make sure you read your T's and C's. What's interesting here is a lot of cyber insurance providers have started to add a number of requirements, including things like multi-factor authentication, looking at you, 23andMe, endpoint detection and response, called EDR, and even regular tabletop exercising to plan to deal with breaches. So as a result, for companies that aren't meeting those requirements, they're now getting denied policy renewals or claims as a result of all of this. This really ultimately, I think, reflects what underwriters are seeing out in the wild. So it's a good indicator about what kind of threats we're seeing in the marketplace. Again, I do always put a little grain of salt on what cyber insurers pick. It is mostly about what things create the largest losses for them. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily the number one thing that you should be focused on, but it is interesting nonetheless.
Yeah, I mean, it's a natural progression, right? Because you can't just insure people who don't take the steps to safeguard the information or safeguard their systems and then continuously file claims when something bad happens, like a ransomware attack, right? So there is some learning that's going on in this industry itself, and identifying requirements, baseline requirements for organizations to meet to qualify for certain tiers of coverage and certain riders and things like that. It's a natural progression. And I can't say that I don't disagree, or I can't say that I disagree with these companies, because at the end of the day, if you're an organization that needs cybersecurity insurance, you know that you at least have some sort of risk to your organization from a cyber perspective. So you should be doing a bare minimum to safeguard your systems, to secure your systems and assets. And if you're not doing that, why should an insurer agree to cover you?
Mm-hmm.
So I understand. I think we'll see this kind of evolve similarly to the health insurance industry, where there'll be legislation about what has to be covered or what can be excluded from coverage, or what qualifications can be added to these plans, and we'll start to see that mature over time. But absolutely, I understand where these insurers are coming from, because otherwise it's the Wild West, right? You don't know who you're insuring, what their cyber posture is, and how often they're going to end up filing claims because of it. So it would behoove you to include some baseline requirements. Yeah. I've seen, like, depending on the industry that you're supporting, if you're supporting government or you're supporting healthcare, I see them adding specific provisions around, like for a defense industrial base contractor, CMMC certification, or for a healthcare provider or a covered entity, HIPAA compliance, and being able to demonstrate those things, because those do present some risk to you as well if you're not maintaining those certifications. So I do see things like that, and this is also just feels like much of a natural progression.
Yeah, and again, we call out and say, hey, cyber insurance at the end of the day isn't a safety net. It is a control. Mm-hmm. It's a way of mitigating some risk. And obviously, if cyber insurers are focused on this, that means they are seeing losses that are of notable value. So it is probably worth you looking at, examining some of these things and implementing them.
And it's a market-based solution too, right? Like this insurance market exists because people have been breached and they need some sort of reprieve when things happen to them. So some sort of coverage. So the fact that these insurers are able to impose requirements on organizations, it's a market-based solution rather than these directives coming directly from, like, the federal government or coming from state and local governments. It's coming from a market, right? It's coming from the market itself. This is what it's going to take for you to be covered and to have insurance.
That is the truth. Well, good news. That takes us to my favorite part of today's show, the lightning round. Got a number of quick hit stories that just weren't quite worth diving in a little bit deeper on, so we wanted to at least cover them. Something we're seeing out in the wild is AI voice phishing getting really real. Ultimately, people are now leveraging clips from, I don't know, say a podcast from a cybersecurity company where they talk for long periods of time to train voice models, and then call employees asking for things like W-2s. Or in one case, we found a news story about a synthetic voice of a CEO authorizing a $25 million transfer. My main takeaway here, voice should never be proof of anything. So if somebody ever asks you, you should go back to them through a different channel and ask them. So if they called you, maybe ask them via Slack or vice versa. But if you are a CEO especially, and you shame your employees for calling you or asking about if something was legit or not, shame on you. And you probably deserve to lose $25 million. Andrew, you're probably in the same bucket too. You're probably going to face a fake AI call from you in the near future.
Probably. I mean, again, like anything, and this goes back to the EU regulation we were talking about too, right? Like the ways people are allowed to use and train models based on information that's available. Obviously, taking somebody's, their voice from publicly available videos or other sources and creating a model off of that, or creating even a 3D image of me and then holding that up on a screen to fool Face ID or facial recognition software. That's the type of stuff that the EU is actually trying to deal with right now, because these things are actually happening, and it's only going to get worse, right? Like, this stuff is getting better and better, and the way it can actually depict somebody's voice or depict their facial features is going to get a lot better with shading and with tone and precision. It's just going to get better. So we have to be absolutely adamant that the way organizations and companies are allowing people to access their information, access their accounts, accessing critical resources, stuff of that nature, it needs to be grounded in something that is verifiably human or verifiably us.
Mm-hmm.
So, like maybe moving past certain biometric type authenticators is where we have to go. This is the lesson learned here.
Jack in like in the Matrix and have a giant needle in our
Honestly,
spine?
no.
That's the only way we can log onto the internet.
I'm sure somebody could fake that too, but no, I think we're going to have to move beyond biometric in general, just because the things that are convenient for humans to use as a biometric authenticator, like retinal scans or 3D images of our faces or voice recognition, that stuff can be faked. That stuff can be modeled and trained on an AI
and stolen, right? Even if I'm
exactly.
hashing a fingerprint and I store it as a value that's a more secure value than a small password, it can still get stolen, and that hash runs with it, and it's gone. It's done. That information is now officially stolen.
So I mean,
it's the same problem.
The Face ID stuff can do depth, right? It does depth perception. So if you hold a picture of somebody up, it can technically determine that that's a picture of somebody and not the actual person. But people are creative, so now you have these generative models of people's faces and their features, and they're being 3D printed onto basically mannequins, which held up in front of a camera have the 3D depth and can fool facial recognition. That was actually, somebody did that at it was Black Hat, one of the conferences. They 3D printed a model of somebody's facial features, held it up and fooled Face ID on an Apple iPhone. So that's where we're headed, and I think we just have to move past these types of authenticators to, like, especially like phone companies. They love to use voice passcodes. Not a thing anymore. Don't do it. Shouldn't be a thing.
Nope. Yeah, my voice is my password, or whatever it is that you say. It's not
no,
great.
Your long complex password should be your password, or if you have to have a second form of factor, it should be a push notification to an app on a device in your hand, or passkeys. Let's move towards passwordless altogether.
Yeah, do something. It's not working. We can, we love our password table, but I'll be happy the day that we no longer have to do it because passwords are obsolete. So looking forward to that.
Yep.
Also, I saw a story about a biotech firm that got hit by ransomware. This one was interesting because they held all the lab results hostage. So unclear if they had EDR and tabletop exercises for their cyber insurance policy, or if they had one at all. But currently about 12,000 active patient test records were all being held hostage. So that company isn't doing their work. They're doing no research, nothing about whatever they were doing. And of course, those hackers demanded payment in crypto, naturally. So at the end of the day, even for a small company who thought they wouldn't, be in a position to be held ransom, again, most ransomware attacks are just spread across the internet. They're not directly targeted at companies. And so as a result, you click on that link, download that malware, you're done. And so your company that may be a quickly growing startup is now quickly headed towards bankruptcy. Yeah.
You want to hear something scary? We'll talk about fully automated AI managed ransomware attack workflows that basically spray and pray across the open internet. They enumerate services, vulnerable services, attack those systems, and then as soon as they get a hit and they understand that they've breached the system, they then the AI scours the internet for contact details, sends out information to the organization that's been affected, demanding payment, and there's no human interaction whatsoever.
Custom. Well, it all gets, especially bespoke for phishing. Now, they can scour all the internet, gather everything about you. Once they get in, right, that AI can launch the malware attack. It can navigate. It can move around. It can send additional emails, compromise email inboxes. And then, I just sit here and I wait, and my crypto wallet fills up, and I haven't even done a thing. I don't know who I've hit at this point. So we moved from the days of kind of broad attacks for a while to more tailored phishing attacks, as hackers and scammers wanted to get more into the game of finding big clients that could pay out. And now we're back to the day of just broad swaths again, because AI can do it for us. And it's a numbers game. If I send 10,000 phishing emails, I only need one. And if that company loses 12,000 records and I'm asking for a giant payment, then here we are. Oh boy. They probably should have invested more in some cybersecurity protections. Speaking of, looking at kind of a budget forecast, both Forrester and Gartner, leaders in terms of research or something, their reports, though, say that cybersecurity spending is going to hold steady through the rest of 2025. Organizations, though, are shifting dollars that they are spending from tools to ultimately measurable outcomes. So thinking things like unified platforms, managed services, and the biggest boon of the year, risk quantification. Of course, I would be remiss if I didn't take a moment to plug our tool here from Hive Systems, Derive, that helps quantify all of those risks. And you can find out more information there at www.deriverisk.com. That being said, I feel like this makes sense. This kind of lines with the global economy. A lot of companies are holding tight, not trying to spend more money, trying to maybe rationalize their over expenditures in the past. But at the same time, I think it's just boards and leadership teams getting wise and going, hey, I'm not just going to start dumping money to your team. You need to be doing something for me and showing some reasonable outcome as a result.
Yeah. I mean, if you need any more evidence of where industry sits with regards to cybersecurity and how it is never considered a priority in the boardroom, you need only look at CISO compensation packages and the lack of growth in CISO compensation compared to other executive leadership roles. Kind of tells you a lot about what they think about cybersecurity in the boardroom.
Great points. They've been pretty, they're large, do not get us wrong, but they've been pretty flat. Yeah. Whereas we're seeing, 10x increases in other C-suite executive compensation packages, allegedly as a C-suite position, the C in CISO is chief. It is not quite making that high level. So here we are.
I mean, CISOs are a little bit at a disadvantage compared to some other positions, because usually they're coming to the leadership calls asking for more money to buy a solution or implement a solution or hire more people or add more processes. Whereas, like a CFO is like, I just saved us a bunch of money by cutting all these things and all this stuff that we didn't need anymore. And then one of those things was cybersecurity. So, the CISOs come in at a disadvantage, especially when they go into like their executive comp discussions. But I think people need to really start thinking about like the way they compensate different, chief information officers, chief information security officers a little bit differently, because the risk tied to those positions is much greater than the risk tied to like a CFO, right? The risks that are associated with that CISO position, if they're not competent or they're not able to manage their cybersecurity effectively, has a lot more direct impact from a dollars perspective on the organization, even if you're just talking about reputational or legal or compliance costs. Like, there's a lot more tangible risk to the organization that a CISO has to deal with than, let's say, a CFO. So I think the executive comp packages need to be, I don't want to say like reevaluated. CFOs do a lot of work and they do deserve the pay that they get, but I think CISOs deserve to be put on the same level of those other leadership positions. And I just think today they're still not.
Good footnote to avoid CFOs from sliding into your DMs and hating on you there. Good catch.
Our CFO.
We're looking, obviously, we've been doing one of these a quarter now. We hit back in Q1. You can check our past video online and down the show notes there. Obviously, this wraps up our Q2 outlook, or our Q2 review. Looking into Q3, though, of this year, July, August, and September, for those of you not in the financial calendar. A couple interesting stories coming down the pipe. The first is the SEC here in the United States is going to issue their final ruling on cyber incident disclosures. That is expected in late Q3 of this year. As you may remember, they ruled this last year for financial firms to disclose material breaches and incidents. That, of course, mimics, or rather was a leader, actually, in this case, compared to the EU's version, which is called DORA, that kind of does the same thing. So there's an interesting one where the US has led the way. That being said, they're going to issue some additional guidance around that. Companies have been working overtime to stop this from happening because, of course, they don't like disclosing that they have breaches because it impacts their stock price. So I am very interested to see how this ends up shaking out. The nice part is it has been great. It has provided a lot of information out to us as cybersecurity practitioners and researchers about what is going on in the world in terms of companies and the impacts. whereas all that data lived in a black box or under insurer portfolios previously. So I'm looking forward to this one. Also interesting, there's been a number of growing concerns very recently of the adoption of AI in terms of cybersecurity, triaging alerts and the like. The biggest thing that's been actually hitting the marks is, of course, hallucinations, where AI makes up information and is confidently incorrect in the information it has asserted. I can speak from experience that I've caught ChatGPT in a lie a number of times, confronted it, and it goes, "Oh, my bad," and of course then re-researches. Why I can't just do that in the first place, I don't know. But of course, if I'm relying on AI to scour my entire company and maybe even using AI as a tier 1 SOC analyst, if it's giving me false security alerts, I'm wasting time investigating it, or I'm getting together the whole board in the middle of the night for something that's not a cybersecurity incident. You can say, of course, we're supposed to rely on AI and not just trust implicitly, but that's not going to help. So I'm interested to see how that continues to go and if companies actually start to kind of walk back from AI cybersecurity tooling.
Well, I mean, honestly, like when you're sitting in a room with a person, or even if you're talking to somebody just casually, they give hints like tonally or facial expression wise, whether they or not they understand or believe what they're saying. AI doesn't give any of those hints. So when it says something, it says it with 100% confidence to you. And generally people who don't know any better will take that as 100% truth. You should always research what you're getting out of AI to make sure that it is giving you actual truth and not what it thinks, because context detection in LLMs and AI today is still not great. It's still not perfect. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it confuses context, or it confuses the information that it's parsing and provides you with a false result or a false positive. So it behooves you to go double check that information anyway. Never trust what you're getting out of AI as truth.
Yep. They're kind of headed down the same path for interesting things also as we're looking into Q3. I thought this one was interesting as I was researching around. Currently today in the US, we have a patchwork of privacy laws between states. Some leaders like California and even our home state of Virginia have led the way. The problem is for companies operating in the United States, there are 52 different privacy laws that they have to meet. So I'm guessing finally most of those companies have fired up their lawyers and lobbyists and gone to the federal government and said, this is not working for us. GDPR is nice because if you do business in Europe, you only have to meet one privacy regulation, which is great. However, here in the States, we continue to have to meet multiple rulings about what is defined as PII, the number of breaches or number of records that get breached and when I have to report it and to who. It is a huge pain, to put it politely. There is a possible federal privacy bill gaining bipartisan traction in Congress. I'm guessing most congressional leaders have heard about this at this point. That being said, I have no hopes of this getting passed anytime soon, but at least we're finally talking about it. I'm guessing enough companies have gotten fed up with trying to do a 52 different state rules for managing everything.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. The United States political climate makes this challenging, right? Because we have, one side that is okay with creating federal law and creating federal regulation and basically imposing that down to industry from the federal government. But you have the other side who is, the state side, right? The states should have some sovereignty. They should have some say in the matter of regulation, especially. So you have this tug of war that happens between administrations and between even, like congressional representatives, where it's hard to get bipartisan support for federal legislation these days. I mean, unless there's like some overarching theme, like we got COPPA, right? The mm-hmm. Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, because children. But in other scenarios where it's, there's less of a common issue that people are trying to address, it becomes difficult. So unfortunately, I think you're going to continue seeing some of these very specific state-specific legislations kind of pop up mm-hmm. until something bad happens, right? Because that's usually what it takes in this country for something to change. Something bad happens, and then there's consensus at the federal level that a federal law is needed. But I would not put my eggs in federal legislation basket, especially under this administration, just because there's a huge push for state sovereignty and states' rights.
Yeah, and I did do a quick search as well here. I can remember how many states actually have laws. Currently, it sits at 20, so a little under half. So as a result, is that enough to get it by? That being said, it does include a number of very large states: Washington, Oregon, California, Texas, Florida, Virginia, New York, all in the mix in terms of kind of large states. So some big players in terms of passing this legislation. I would argue they may have enough swing to get things going, but I'm not counting on it. So unfortunately, here in the U.S., we are likely to continue to deal with that patchwork moving forward.
You might see something like a GovRamp, right, where you have this conglomerate of states who decide to band together to create a de facto national standard, but it won't apply across the board. Obviously, you have to be a member to it or a party to it. So I think you'll see something like that form, where like you have maybe Oregon, California, Maryland, Virginia, New York, Texas, Florida, who realize that there is like some commonality and overlap to their regulations. So they decide to create like a cohesive framework incorporating elements of it. But I don't know if you'll ever get to that national standard until something bad happens.
Yep. Final shout out before we go today. I bought this cool thing. It's a replacement for your compressed air canister. So for any of you who'd like to clean all the dust out of your electronics, obviously compressed air has some impacts on our ecosystem, and they've come out with this thing. I was very doubtful that it was going to blow air as fast as compressed air, and spoiler alert, it does an incredible job. It gets it out of your nooks and crannies in your keyboard and your phones. So I can't recommend a specific brand, but this one was great. So definitely worth looking in and researching.
I'm looking around because I think I have a similar one. It doesn't look like that, but they all basically do the same thing. One thing I will say is they are very loud.
Oh, man, I cut that thing on and my ears were ringing afterwards. Like I been outside with a leaf blower. So yeah, okay, I'm glad you said the same thing.
Yeah, but they do work really well. Yep.
They're working well. Andrew, thank you for joining me today. I appreciate it, and all the insights as well.
Sure, absolutely. Happy to be here as always.
All right, well, that's a wrap on this quarter's Cybersecurity Roundup. Thanks for tuning in. So whether you came for the headlines or the hot takes, we hope you're walking away with a better sense of where things are headed, both at the end of this quarter and into the next one. We'll make sure to drop a link to all the relevant show notes in our show notes so you can dive in deeper. And if there's one theme this quarter, it is this. Cybersecurity risks are not slowing down, they're evolving. So the smarter you are about the headlines, the stronger your response can be. So don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and check out all of our past episodes over at www.hivesystems.com/HiveLive. And hey, if you learned something new, share it with a colleague. We're all in this together. Until next time, remember, when it comes to cybersecurity, you need to act and not react. Thank you.